station.
Welcome back, Cincinnati, to Talk of the Town with PG Sittenfeld. So glad you are spending some of your day with us. We got the conversation started about the role of the media in this year's elections by talking to a senior editor of the Huffington Post, and delighted to now continue that conversation with Ben Swann. You know him as the evening anchor at Fox 19. Ben Swann, welcome to the show.
PG, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, we really appreciate it. And, you have been very active as the evening anchor at Fox 19 covering this year's presidential election. I guess, starting out, what's your goal when you're covering a presidential race?
Well, I think the goal has to be to get to facts, because one of the problems that we have in our current news cycle, it's a 24-hour news cycle, and we have kind of turned into the society that feeds off a lot of opinions. It feeds off of really, quite honestly, a lot of silly stuff that has nothing to do with the office of the president.
Sure.
And we've turned it into this kind of debate over, issues of who's more likable and who would I rather have a beer with, when none of that really has to do with what the office of the presidency is about. And so what we really try to do is look for facts, look at where a candidate's position is, and try to hold politicians responsible for things they've said in the past and for positions they've taken, because as you know, too often today, politicians say one thing and do another, or will say multiple things, 3 or 4 different things. I mean, Governor Romney has taken positions on multiple sides of many issues. President Obama's taken positions on multiple sides of an issue. And so what we find is it's very difficult to separate fact from fiction these days, and that's what we're about.
And let me ask you this, because I think that's obviously a very noble mission, and I will, despite being a politician myself, I will not defend the cohort of my peers who stray from the facts or who flip-flop. But is that what sort of voters in the audience are looking for? Are they looking for facts, or in some ways do they want you, Ben Swann, to say, well, I'm going to reveal the character of the man? Of course, those are intertwined, but what's your audience looking for? The same thing?
No, I think the audience is not looking for us to reveal the character. I think some people do, but I think that it's only when they're looking to reinforce what they already believe. One thing we got to watch out for in today's media cycle is that people, most of the time, are running to media who are not giving them information to change their minds. They're going to media who will reinforce something that they already believe on their own. And so now it's validated by what the media is telling them. So what we find is we do have the majority of our people who are watching the reality check segments that we do are really interested in the facts. And they will email and say, look, here's something that's being talked about, and I want to know what's true here. And it's not about reinforcing what they already suspect. And certainly when you say the character of a man, you're never going to know the character of a man based on the issues that are coming up in these races.
Right.
You're just not going to. You may know the character of their handlers, but you're not going to know their character. And that's one of the difficulties, is kind of cutting through all of the spin that goes on around these guys and getting down to the facts of those positions and the claims that are made.
So you have had access to a lot of the big dogs in this current presidential cycle. So let me ask you, when you're interviewing someone who may well be the next leader of the free world, how do you make sure that you're sort of holding them accountable and asking them the tough questions? I mean, have you ever sort of felt, I might be sitting next to the person who's about to occupy the Oval Office? Does it change the interview dynamic?
I think it does. I think it would be disingenuous to say that it wouldn't. But here's the thing. At the end of the day, I think it's much more important that we look at what the role of a president is here in our society. In our republic, a president is supposed to, under their oath of office, uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. We see, politicians take that oath of office all the time, and it doesn't necessarily resonate, I think, with the general public of what that means. That means that the rights and the liberties that our founders and our framers put into the Constitution are protected by and upheld by this man or woman who ultimately becomes commander-in-chief and the chief executive. And so one of the things that I try to do is not ask questions based upon what I want to know personally, but rather what I think the general public should know about how this man or woman would ultimately, in this case it's these two men, how they would be willing to uphold and protect rule of law in this country and protect the rights of the individuals in this country. Because they shouldn't be running for this office for themselves. They should be running for the people of this country and to better the lives of the people they represent.
No, absolutely.
Ben, hi. My name's Tamaya. I actually work at PG's office. One thing I wanted to ask you before I asked a question, a comment I wanted to make more so. Earlier this year, you raised eyebrows by turning down a Tea Party rally, moderating a Tea Party rally on Found Square. Yep. And that particularly resonated with me because that kind of held your integrity intact And it actually made me a fan of yours. I wasn't really that familiar with you, but because of that single action, I know that you were, and I saw that you were trying to be an unbiased member of the media. You gained a fan, so I just wanted to give you kudos for that, and I appreciate. And I'm sure you would have done that on either side. So I appreciate your integrity in that. But with the question, I wanted to know, outside of that, what's been your most memorable moment of coverage in this year's election so far?
Well, I would have to say the most memorable time was actually getting to interview the president one-on-one. And even though, I've really enjoyed all of the interviews we've done, when you get a chance to interview one-on-one a sitting president, I think any journalist, that's going to be a highlight, certainly in your career. And one thing that I enjoyed about that experience was through our reality check segment, I've been very hard on this president on at least 4 key issues. And those were the 4 issues that I raised to him when I got a chance to interview him, because I felt like it's unfair or, again, disingenuous on my part to raise questions about policies, and then when I have a chance to interview him, to ask him what's on his iPod.
Right.
Or to ask him some other question. Give him the chance to then answer those questions. So certainly I think for me it was a terrific moment to be able to do that, and something that I thoroughly enjoyed.
What surprised you most about that interview? I mean, did he? I won't be the lightweight journalist who asked. Did he catch a fly jiu-jitsu style in his hand while the interview was going on? But did you leave that interview and the experience of sitting there with him sort of changed your mind about something, or gave you a new sort of lens onto the president?
It really didn't, because we had been hard on him on these areas because we felt that he was not. His rhetoric and his statements were not matching, and the answers that he gave to these, we went back and fact checked them, and again, it didn't match. And these are pretty complicated issues. So, for instance, one of the big ones was when we asked him about that presidential kill list, and it was frustrating to me when I asked him a question about that. He said, "I don't comment on that. I don't talk about that." And he said, "These are reports that you're talking about this kill list." He says that I myself have never verified. Well, what's frustrating to me about that is members of his administration consistently talk about that kill list to media. It's leaked all the time.
Sure.
But he wouldn't talk about it. And then the next day, because our story broke, it was picked up nationally, went viral. I mean, we had 6 different national publications that reran it or wrote articles about it. The very next day, he sat down with CNN to talk about it. And so, again, this is complicated stuff. It's not just one guy. There's lots of hands in this, lots of people in the campaigns who were saying, let's do this, and everything's about damage control. I understand that. But for me personally, what I would have liked to have seen was had the president say, okay, let's talk about it. Here's why I believe that it's justified. This is why I believe it's acceptable. We can disagree on those issues, but let's talk about them. Let's not kind of push it under the rug and then move on and let a campaign advisor then come back and run interference.
Well, you raise an interesting point too, I guess, about elected officials or anybody who's being interviewed, sort of, saying different things in different circumstances to different outlets. And you touched upon this earlier. What's your thought on the fact that, okay, so if you're liberal, you tune into MSNBC. If you're more conservative, you tune into Fox News. So people can basically sort of live in an echo chamber nowadays. I can't imagine that's a healthy thing for what you started out talking about, people getting at facts, right?
Well, it's not at all. It's actually, I think it has really sped up the death of journalism in America, because people they've run to these different sides. And what we find now is that, Fox News for conservatives, it's not about presenting facts. MSNBC, not about presenting facts. They're about reinforcing an idea that their people already believe. And what you find is with the pundits who appear on these shows, they're not there to provide any extra facts either. I mean, you would think a pundit would have some additional information, but it's not. It's just people shouting at each other and making wild claims. And what we find now is that Fox and MSNBC have almost become, it's Karl Rove versus David Axelrod, and it's talking points being thrown back and forth at each other.
Well,
that's become the discourse.
I do think part of the burden is, let's say there is a presidential debate or something that's incredibly boring. Yep. Just because there's no story doesn't mean the next day, Fox 19 can't tell a story, or the Cincinnati Enquirer can't run a story. I think that the burden is there to tell a story, preferably a good one, whether it really happened or not. So, I think it does put the media in a tricky situation. Until Ben Swann moves up to host the NBC Nightly News, which we look forward to that day, who would you say on the national stage is sort of the most trusted person by the broadest swath of people in the sort of American viewership?
Okay, so you had kind of tipped me off that this question was coming today, and I don't know. I honestly don't know. So I actually went around and I surveyed people that I do know and said, okay, tell me who.
What did your poll say? Right.
And their response to me was, I don't know. And it actually takes with a lot of blank stares. And one person said, well, maybe Brian Williams, maybe.
Right,
maybe. And I asked them, why do you say Brian Williams? And they said, because I'm not sure he has an opinion. I don't really know what he thinks. So it wasn't so much they could point to, well, Brian Williams, I think, is fair or honest, ... It was, I don't know that he's not. So I think that says a lot about kind of the state of where we are with media today. Look, people, again, they're at a loss. The days of the Walter Cronkites, the Edward R. Murrows,
kiss those days goodbye,
done,
basically,
right?
Yeah.
They just are. And those guys all had opinions. They absolutely did.
I think Brian Williams is kind of suave. You remind me of Brian Williams a little bit, Ben.
Well, thank you.
Ben Swann, I think you have, in addition to answering the tough questions, you've certainly earned an admirer today. Well, we know you got to run and host. Last question for you, since Tamaya has now deemed you suave, since you obviously, you clearly do have strong ideals and convictions about journalism and certainly other things too. Got to ask, would you ever be tempted to run for office?
You know what? I've never been tempted to run for office, and I think I'm on the safe side. I get to go, hold people accountable. That's always safer than somebody doing the same thing to me. So far, no aspirations in that direction.
Well, this certainly applies to me too, but keep on keeping them honest, and thanks so much for joining us on the show today, Ben Swann.
Thanks so much, guys.
We will talk to you later, and I really admire, I think a lot of journalists these days do sort of, they get on there and they think my job is to entertain, my job is to drive ratings. I don't know Ben Swann especially well. I watch his reality check, and I do like the fact that no matter what the issues is, here's the one hand, here's the other hand. But no denying the man has serious journalistic convictions, which I think are probably fading in the world we live in a little bit today. So
yeah, I think it's a rare breed.
Well, I feel a little bit enlightened myself on the state of the media. I'm not sure it's an optimistic diagnosis, but you know what'll cheer us up, I think, Tamaya? Talking to George Costanza from Sittenfeld, in real life known as Jason Alexander. He is going to be coming up out of the break, so should be a fun conversation. I don't know what exactly he's going to have to say, but I do know this much, and I've said this before. President Obama has some pretty cool surrogates, some pretty cool people who like to go out and speak on his behalf. Had Kimora Lee Simmons on the show last week, and going to be talking with George Costanza coming out of the next break. You're listening to Talk of the Town on 1230, The Buzz.
Let's get it started in here.